The COVID emergency in Victoria has caused massive problems for people who love their live music, and one of them is, I suppose, one of the hardest working parts or members of artist bookings. Her name is Leanne Gunnulson. Leanne, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, George. Good to be here.
When we heard there was a COVID cluster in Victoria, you actually found out before anyone else, because you got, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8?
8 gigs cancelled in one day in a row. As soon as those restrictions, which I reckon is another name for lockdown, are announced, I lost 8 gigs in a row, and it was a shock and a horror. We lost...
And this is after you've just spent nearly a year almost on hold, waiting for government and others to see a path to allow talented people to be able to perform again.
Yes.
And we've had a number of your acts in the studio here playing some beautiful music, some sensational music.
Yeah.
And of course, understanding and hearing now that many of them are still struggling to get one act out or one booking of meaningful business is shocking. So what are you hoping to hear from government? Is it going to get worse before it gets better?
It's certainly going to get worse, because there's a very high likelihood that Victoria will go into a lockdown, or Melbourne will go into a lockdown, and that will cause the cancellation of 1, 2 or even 3 weeks of gigs. And then it breaks confidence, and it stops people from coming back and wanting to book. It takes months to get that impetus up again.
I accept that, and that's a very fair call. I've also heard that from people who are in the hospitality game, that people have come back and they're spending more than ever before. It's as if they're trying to make up for that deprivation. I'm just wondering why they aren't doing it with live acts.
So it started to pick up, and the reason I could cancel 8 was because I had 8 gigs.
Wow.
I had lots of stuff booked in for Reconciliation Week.
Yep.
But because of the risk to our elders,
Of course.
attending events, they all pulled back, and so that was a direct consequence. Eight artists at least were cancelled through those gigs.
Is there a better way to maybe handle these COVID clusters or these COVID emergencies that doesn't impose itself in such a really dramatic way for performing acts, for live acts? Because I understand now the football might still go on.
The football might go on.
But you guys are told no-go zone.
No-go zone. We had a gig at the football for Reconciliation Week, which we cancelled, because the footballers need to be isolated to make sure they can travel interstate. So as soon as that was one gig gone,
They need to stay in their little hub.
They need to stay in their hub, so they couldn't come and join the event. Gig direct cancelled as a result of the restrictions. I had another gig that was cancelled because as soon as people have to wear masks, they're not coming into the office, they're working from home. The corporate employers who are hiring music to activate their foyers have gone, we don't need it this week. We don't need it next week either, because our workforce is working from home.
So it precipitates all this action and reaction, and it causes a tremendous disruption to just about everything we know.
Everything we know. It keeps rolling on, but the part that I struggle with is we know the impact it has on hospitality. We know it's a problem for restaurants. We know it's a problem for their suppliers. They have received assistance from the government. Not enough, but they have received assistance. Musicians have received nothing.
From the get-go?
From the get-go. It's tokenistic, and what happens is money goes to venues for artists. Artists aren't seeing that money. I think that voucher system that they're using to get people to come into restaurants again and spend money should be applied to the music industry. So corporate...
That would be exciting, actually.
Yeah. So if you're a venue and you're having an event, you can have a voucher to hire or offset the cost of having a musician in your venue.
Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
That's going to help.
A step outside how we think.
How we think.
And because we'd need to do that, because these are different times. The last thing they are is normal times.
So we need to give those, the way the voucher systems worked, I took advantage of it when I went on holiday over summer.
Some of the hotel resorts, yeah.
Why aren't we giving those corporate entities that are hiring artists the opportunity to offset those costs through a voucher system? Why aren't commercial businesses that are hiring artists like Wilson Parking and Total Tools given the opportunity to get vouchers to offset for their corporate parties and functions?
I must say, I went to a function only a couple of weeks ago, and one of the delights, in fact, it was the Melbourne City Chairman's Club function, and they had a live band playing.
Perfect.
And it was just fantastic. It was actually a trio, not only beautifully fluent and gifted and played a tremendous selection of music, but listening to live music as distinct from tape music in a
Different
special
world.
environment. You're right, chalk and cheese.
Chalk and cheese.
Yeah,
And it really does add to the atmosphere, create a really great mood, really bring a life to your events.
It does.
That's what live music does. That's why we have so much of it. We want it. But when we get things like this latest raft of restrictions, there are silent.
Do you have any contacts with government? Are
Not-
they listening?
No, government doesn't seem to be listening. Yes, I did inform a very high up contact of the health department of the impact I was receiving as a consequence of the latest restrictions. But it's the fact that they don't seem to understand how to apply assistance. Because they haven't thought outside their box.
You know, it's interesting. The Premier of Victoria has said on a number of occasions, and it's almost ad nauseum now, we have a roll gold contact tracing system. And over the last few days, the one thing that we've all got to look at one another and say, with great surety, the one thing we haven't got is a roll gold contact tracing system. Otherwise, we wouldn't be making assumptions on the run that have caused these problems. Look, tremendous to have you in the studio. Let's hope things settle down ASAP.
Yes.
But more importantly, that idea that you've posed, if government is listening, if others are listening, to help our live musos right around Australia, not just Victoria, because if it happens once here, it's going to happen around the country.
Happens around the country.
Let's see if we can get a system, maybe a voucher system, as Leanne alluded to help musos and others to stay ahead or keep their heads above water, because we've all got commitments and bills.
It's a really simple system. You know, you have vouchers and you have to hire through GST registered providers so that you have a capacity to reconcile that. I think it's a great idea to get some sort of support for artists.
Let's get them to think outside the square.
Let's.
Leanne Gunnulson in the studio from Artist Bookings, telling us that there is a way forward, but we've got to be brave enough to think like that.